Many years ago, the web was a really boring place. The one thing we were really lacking was a general purpose language to run inside a browser. So there was this hot new thing called Java. And Java was going to transform the IT industry. And people thought, okay, what if the browser could also just do general purpose programming? So we got a scripting language called JavaScript. So the idea is you write code and you give it to the browser, and then the browser understands what's going on. And this opens up a world of new possibilities. So the thing that's actually interpreting JavaScript is something called the engine of browser. So in this instance, I'm using Chrome, and Chrome has an engine called V8. And if you're using something like Safari, it has an engine called WebKit, and Mozilla Firefox has a different engine. But the idea is that browsers, they have engines and they have ways of interpreting JavaScript. So JavaScript isn't a thing in and of itself. It's something you write and then something interprets it. Generally speaking, it's browsers. And then in 2009, someone said, what if you could run JavaScript outside of a browser? So along came something called Node.js. And the idea was that you could take the V8 engine from the browser, separate it from the browser, and then just make a runtime. And then somehow you could now have JavaScript running server-side. That means JavaScript not only exists for client applications, it can also exist for server applications. So nowadays, there are many different runtimes for JavaScript. Namely, you have something called Deno, which is made by the same people who made Node.js back in the day. And you also have something called Bun, and Bun has to be based on WebKit, which is really different from what Deno and Node.js are doing. But they're all trying to achieve the same thing, and that is, can we interpret JavaScript? So how does this tie together with the package manager called NPM? Well, NPM is generally bundled together with Node.js. So when you install Node.js, you get a little package manager called NPM. And when you use the command NPM, you generally use it in conjunction with distribution of software. So you install new packages, or you want to publish some packages to some registry. Notice that I don't say distribution of Node.js-based JavaScript. This is not just for server applications. If you're making things that are going to run inside the browser, so client-side applications, you will also be using Node.js. When you go to installation instructions of JavaScript packages, generally you will always see the npm command being used a lot, but sometimes you'll also see the yarn command and the pnpm command. These are technically different package managers, but they are trying to overcome some of the shortcomings that NPM itself has. But everyone starts out by learning how to use NPM, and maybe they see some of the benefits of the other package managers that are trying to compete with NPM. But the basics is that you learn how to use NPM and the commands inside of NPM. So how do you get started with using it? Well, first of all, you have to download Node.js, and then you'll get NPM itself with it. So if you go to nodejs.org and you go to the download page, if you're completely new to using command line interfaces, the easiest installation is just to click on the pre-built installer and then just pick your operating system here. And generally, I recommend using an LTS version. It stands for long-term support. If you want all of the newest features, you can use the newest version, of course. But generally speaking, if you want something that's going to run in production for a customer, you would want something that has long-term support. So for most people, it's recommended to install the long-term supported version, and then over time, they will release a new long-term supported version. If you're comfortable with command line interfaces, it's easy to just find these instructions here. You just copy these, and then you paste it into your terminal. So I'm going to do a short little demonstration of what Node.js is. So here I have a directory called test. I'm going to make a file called index.js, and then I'm going to just write a line of JavaScript there, and then we'll execute it with Node.js. So depending on your machine, either you will have to open some kind of editor or like a notepad or whatever, and then just write the text manually and just save it to a file. The hello world program is just console.log hello world. and then end off with a semicolon here. And then you write a node, and then you point to the file. So that will be index.js, and it will say hello world. Alternatively, you can also just write node straight out like this, and then just write whatever JavaScript you want here. Console.log hello world again. So there it is, server-side JavaScript. I'll make a slightly longer demonstration here with NPM because there's a lot of use cases that you need to be comfortable with, because you will get into some situations where you need to know exactly what to do with NPM. In order to just create some kind of project that uses NPM, you can write npm init, and then there will be an installation wizard if you press enter now, but you can also write -ny, and then it will just create a file for you called package.json. Now this file is extremely important, and it has to be called package.json. If it's called anything else, it's not recognized as being what it is. So package.json, it will list the dependencies for a project, and it will list things like scripts, so all of the metadata associated with your project. If you want to publish your project as a package to the NPM registry, then you also need this one. If you want to install dependencies locally, you will need this file in order to tell NPM what to install. So let's say you want to add a dependency now, such that you can see it inside of your package.json file. The way you do that is using the command npm install. So install is a sub-command of npm. You can also just write I, that is just shorthand for install, and then the name of the package. So I'm going to install a package called Express. So that's a web server for Node.js. You can also go into npmjs.com, and then you can find the packages here. So here, if you search for Express, you should be able to find it right here. It's really popular. Let's see how many downloads there are. 30 million per week, let's just say. Now, if you write out the contents of the package.json file, you can just use the cat command, and then you will see here under dependencies, it will say express and then a version number. So the syntax we have right here is called JSON. JSON works with key value pairs. So this is the name of a key, and this is a value. So the name of version key is the value string 1.0.0, for instance. And the dependencies key here actually has a nested JSON object inside of it. So the express here is also a key, even though dependencies is a key, because express is nested inside of dependencies. So let's just take a look at what this line actually means. We have listed express as a dependency of this project, and this is the version number. We want version major 4, minor 19, and then patch 2. So they're generally just bug fixes. They don't introduce new things into the package. They just try to fix existing stuff. The minor version here means they are introducing new behavior. But generally speaking, a minor release should not break anything. If you're making a change, like a radical change, that means that the tool that you're making doesn't behave like before. You can't use it the same way you could as before. That's a major version. So if they release Express version 5, that means that you cannot use it exactly like you would use Express version 4. But Express version 4.20, I may use exactly like I've always used Express 4.90. They add new things, but it shouldn't break existing stuff if it's minor. When you install a package, recall that you used npm install and then the name of a package. It doesn't only list the package here. First of all, it lists the package, but then it also installs the dependencies. So if you just run npm-i, the package manager will look at this file here and then figure out how do we install these dependencies. So where does it install it to? By default, it's going to install it into a folder called Node Modules. So if you go into Node Modules here, you'll see that there's a ton of stuff in here. That's because the Express.js package itself relies on other packages, which may rely on other packages. So you will install one thing, but in order to have that one thing, it itself needs a lot of other things. So that's why the Node modules folder will be gigantic, and you should never change it manually yourself. The only way you're interacting with the Node modules is npm install. Occasionally, you might actually have a bug that's because of something inside of Node modules. A very common fix here is actually just deleting recursively the Node modules. So just deleting the Node modules folder, and now it's gone. It's not a problem because you can always just get it back by writing npm I. And naturally, this also means that you should always git ignore the Node modules folder. So if we make a git ignore file here, Node modules is the first thing you should put in here, okay? That means if you create a Git repository, then the Node modules will not be staged for commits, okay? Let's just make this git init, git add, git status. You will have these files staged to be committed, but nothing inside of Node modules should be staged to be committed, okay? Always git ignore the Node modules. Now we can install dependencies, we can remove Node modules, and we can rebuild Node modules. Let's say you want to remove a dependency. You can either use npm uninstall express like this, and then if you see the contents of the package.json file, it's going to be gone from in here. You could also just manually modify the package.json file, because anything that's put inside of the package.json file is going to be the source of truth now. So if you go into the dependencies object and you just manually erase the line where it says express, and then just do an npm install, that will be equivalent to just doing an npm uninstall. So currently I just have an empty directory here called test, and I'm going to show how to create a React application using npm. So we're going to start off with npm and then create and then write Vite. If you get the prompt here, okay, to proceed, if you just press enter, that means yes. The project name I'm going to make is just a demo. And now we get this little installation wizard here. You can use your arrow keys here. I'm going to pick React and TypeScript. And now it will give us the commands that we need to use. So the good old cd to go into the demo folder we just created, and then npm install. This is just like we did before. It installs the dependencies. And then they have this command here, npm run dev. And we'll get to what that means now. So after the npm install, if you just write out the contents of the package.json file, you'll now see a bunch of new things here. So of course we have the dependencies like before, and now we also have something called dev dependencies. These are the dependencies that are only required during development. So things like testing, a local serving of the application, and then we also decided to install it with TypeScript. And because TypeScript compiles into JavaScript, which is then interpreted by the browser, you don't actually use TypeScript when the application is running for a customer. You only use it when you're developing the application. That's why there are so many development dependencies, because you only use it before the application is supposed to run in production. And then you have two dependencies here for actual production dependencies. And then you have some scripts up here. Notice that they told us to use a command npm run dev. If you write npm run inside of the directory of package.json, recall that all of the commands that you're using npm for, they are relative to the package.json that is inside of the current working directory. So if you write ls inside of a working directory and you don't see a package.json file here, npm run and then something doesn't mean anything. It only means something if there is a scripts nested object that defines some scripts. So if you run def here, it really just translates into writing Vite. So let's see what's happening when we're actually running npm run def. So it's going to take about 1 second, and then it's going to say it's serving a local host port 5173. If we open up the 5173, we'll have an application here. And this is just a button click application. So what's actually happening here is our browser is getting some files. So it's getting some HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and some other stuff. And then it's representing all of these things as an application to us. So the program doesn't inherently run on our computer. We have a web server, and the web server serves some files, and then the browser makes an HTTP request to this address here. And then we can see, if we go into the networks tab here, when we just request in localhost port 5173, we'll get all of these things back. So for instance, there's an SVG image. This is the SVG image that's being shown by the browser. We can see that it's coming from this address here. There's some JavaScript here. There's some CSS. There's the little React logo also that's spinning here. So all of these things, they are being served to us. And where are they coming from? Well, they're coming from our source code here. So Vite is just helping us build and serve all of these things.